Okay everyone, this is the landscape tutorial part 2. We've created a landscape by importing a 2017 by 2017 height map, which means it's the 2K 2048 by 2048 height map, but Unreal's been using the same clipped height map trick for 25 years. You may have a different one than this one, which is fine. We all use the same landscape material by taking this mountain landscape material instance, as you see right here. So it's not the master material. If I were to open it, you'll see it's the material instance, which lists only the parameters. If we want to go to the parent master material, we can go here in general, and you can click the find button or just double click this and it opens the master material. Be sure, if you want to change the master material, to duplicate it and call it my master material before you alter all of this, because that will mess up the logic for the next time you open. For right now, we're just going to manipulate the material as it is. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to reduce the exponential height fog. Let me show you what that does. So we can bring that height fog down a little bit so it's not quite so annoying. We're going to have this be a third-person experience, and so those always require a player start. And so I'm going to go up here to the add, basic, player start. It's going to put it right there, and if I hit the end key, it'll drop it to the terrain. If I hit the F key, it'll zoom in on it to show me where it did that. Now my zoom is going too fast right now, so I'm going to roll back on my middle mouse button so that it slows it down. And so now it shows us where our start position is, and the blue arrow shows me which way I'll be facing. I want to face up, towards the mountains when I spawn in. The other thing I'm going to do is change the time of day. Probably bring it more towards noon. I've selected the directional light, which is the sun. I'm going to zero out these values here, like that. Now you see where the sun is coming from. You can see the direction of it. If I start raising it about one axis so that it is scrolling about the Y, I can bring it all the way up to noon and all the way back around to sunset, right? If we leave it up, fairly straight up in the air, it's going to look more like noonday. So the sun is coming from a slight angle, and it's casting shadows appropriately on the environment, but it makes things a little bit easier to see. And so now we have a player start position up there, right over here, and you'll recall world settings right here, and you can open that menu from over here, world settings. And as you'll also recall, you can go to the project settings. A lot of the things we need here under maps and modes. Maps being the editor, the map when we open the editor, which map are we looking at, and when we start the game, what is the default map. But for right now, we named it My Landscape Map, and this one, in all content, My Landscape, and so there's My Landscape Map. But I want to make this one the one that always comes up when I open the editor, so I'm going to type in select My Landscape Map for both of these, like this. Very good. Okay, it will be here. Right now it doesn't have a game mode. It's completely empty. We're going to use a third-person game mode because we started in a third-person tutorial. But we're going to say select the game mode and then the third-person character. So now it's going to use the default one, and it'll drop in the Quinn and Mannequin here. And you'll recall, as I do, I'm going to go in here and say it's this one. I'm going to duplicate it, the third person character. I'm going to call it my third person character. Like that. And so now I can change this so that it's my third person character, and it shows so right there. I'm going to open that one. And as you recall, we have imported a modular character from a free one from the store. I'm going to click on Mesh under my third person character here. And this is what I look like, right? If I look here under SKM, we will see alternative people. SKM skeletal mesh underscore quantum character. Could be anything. You could use a different one if you want. But for this tutorial, we've used the quantum characters that are free. I have to choose what animation blueprint he has. Sometimes when you have a character like this, it has an animation blueprint accompanying it. Right now, we've got, you know, the Manny, we've got the Quinn blueprint, animation and Manny blueprint, and there's other ones here. Live link from an external source, like Blender or others, but I'm just going to make it the same as the Manny one for now. It just has a slightly different gate, just to show. And you'll recall I just change things occasionally so I remember which one it is that I'm modifying. I'm going to go in here and turn the lag on, like I do, the camera lag. And we've compiled and saved, closed. I'm going to save the map. Okay, now if I reload Unreal, we see that it has opened the correct map because I changed the maps and modes. It has loaded the third person game mode because we changed it, and my third person, which means if I hit play, we'll see the modular character that we've added, and he is using Manny's animation blueprint, which is great. So all of that is working. Now, in order to adjust the quality of the scene, the quality of the light, the depth of field, the lens, the shutter speed, shadows, blooming, volumetric qualities, all of that, the kind of things that art directors and artists really like to tune and that give Unreal 5 its really high quality of realism. We want to add a post-process volume. And remember, if I use this add up here, it adds it to the scene. If I use this add down here, it adds it to the content browser. But I'm going to add to the scene post-production volume. It's just this small orange cube, maybe hard for you to see. We want it to be large enough to encompass the whole scene for now. Later I may want to change this so that when we go inside of a building, it has its own custom post-production volume. But let's make this one infinite. So I type infinite into the search area. It finds the parameter. We turn on infinite at extent. Now, regardless of how big this box is, it is operating on the entire scene. And we know that's working because if I turn this off, we have all these powerful features. But say, what if we go to exposure and exposure compensation? If I reduce that from 1 to say 0.5, you can see it has reduced the harshness, not of the light of the scene. Nothing's changed in the scene. What's changed is how the camera sees it, the exposure, reducing the exposure. We can also have, apply physical camera exposure. We can, lots of variables here. Cameras, dirt masks, local exposure, lens flare changes, image effects, depth of field, infinite focus, shallow depth of field. We can have auto depth of field changes depending on how macro the shot is, etc. All of that happens here in the post-production feature, including ambient occlusion. And so one of the other things I want to do is go in here, type Ambient Occlusion, and you find the ambient cube map, which is something else. Right now, I'm going to turn on ambient occlusion and the radius, the how much occlusion an object gives to an adjacent surface. I turn those on, but nothing happens. And I think I told you a few weeks ago that the ambient occlusion has a bug right now inside of Unreal 5.5. They keep forgetting a couple of simple commands that we need to turn on in order to have it work. And I want you to see it because as artists, you guys will see the quality of the difference working properly. So we've turned on ambient occlusion. Let me make sure that it's turned on in the world settings. Here we go. Just in case, we'll turn it on in the light mask settings right here. We can also check in the project settings and see if there's anywhere that it is looking for ambient occlusion. Mobile ambient occlusion can be turned on here. It is on right now because we've changed it in the post-process volume. But I think the bug right now has this turned off as well. But you do want these turned on. And then there are a couple of commands that hopefully in the next release of 5.5 they will fix. One of them is this one. R, that means render, .Lumen, that's the global illumination settings of version 5, DiffuseIndirect.SSAO space 1. SSAO is screen space ambient occlusion. 1 means true. So for some reason right now they have it turned off, even though I told it to be turned on. So we go down here into the command and we type r.Lumen.ScreenProbeGather.ShortRangeAO. Now if I back up here, let me just type O again. Okay, now it brings up this little white text menu at the bottom and it tells me what that is, the screen space ambient occlusion, and it says current value equals 0, right to the right of where my cursor is. Current value equals 0. Space, let's make it 1. So now it's true. But there were two commands we needed to look at. The other one was r.Lumen.ScreenProbeGather.ShortRangeAO equals 0. So that needs to be turned off. And so I'm going to just grab that, copy it. I'll try to put it in the description of the video so you guys can see. But I'm going to go down here and type that same thing, and you can see there's a variety of them. The only one we really need is this first one, and it will show you by default that the current value is 1 and it needs to be 0. It took me a while to figure out why this wasn't working. Let me turn these settings on, make it easier. If we go here under lit and we go to the buffer visualization, there's material ambient occlusion, but then there is general screen space ambient occlusion down here. I'm going to turn that on. Now you see within a certain range of the screen space, and we can increase this so that it shows us the entire scene all the way to the mountains, but this is just it's an optimization feature, but you can see what it's doing, and I've explained what ambient occlusion is. It is the light that is occluded by one surface being close to another that are facing different directions. It is true in the dark and it is true in full sunlight. That's what's so powerful about ambient occlusion, is this can enhance a nighttime scene with moonlight as well as during the day, or in a darkened street lit only by street lamps. So if I click the post-production volume, a moment ago, before we typed those features into the command line, and I was looking at the ambient occlusion variables inside this right here, even though they were turned on, it looked like this. The amount of occlusion being added to the scene, even though we had it turned on, was like that. Now I can increase the intensity of that, and I can artificially raise it some more. The radius has a big effect on how much occlusion there is, and especially you may want to have it so that when I turn on the mountains later, so that you can see the ambient occlusion of the mountains, that the radius is larger because it's so much farther away, you know, like this. But if you reduce it too small, you know, it works for objects that are really close up, like this, but, you know, it can be excessive, you know, so you just have to decide what a good value is. The default value a moment ago was 200. Let's make it 100 just to show that we can interactively change it. Okay, so that is being drawn. Now I'm gonna go back and turn on the normal lit scene, and then if we look at these things and change that value, it's very subtle, but you can see it. From this grabbed video right now, it would be very difficult in this particular scene, but it has a big effect, and you want to have that capability. One thing that I see whenever I load the default light settings is I notice that for being a sunny day in the early afternoon, these shadows look pretty dark. And part of it is because the brightness of the sun is so much more powerful than the brightness of the skylight, the ambient light. So I go in here to the directional light and reduce it from 10 to 3. And then even then, still, I think the shadows could be a little brighter. And so I go in here to the skylight and increase the intensity from 1 to 2. And I know this capture is not the most accurate in the world, but it is increasing the brightness of that. We could even, you know, increase it some more. And if this were Pixar, they might add a little blue light, a little more blue color to the shadows, and so it gives you that quality. And that, you know, starts to give it more of the feeling we want. I'm going to click on post-production volume and then zoom over to it again, which is not too far away from our start position. And you see we've adjusted the exposure compensation, and that works just like your eyes would. If you turn and look at the sun, your pupils would close, just like this. And then if you look at someplace dark, your pupils will open up. And the same thing comes with exposure compensation for an auto exposure for a digital camera or a film. And so that's why, and then how long it takes for your eyes to adjust and that sort of thing is also a factor. But that is why we have capabilities of, you know, macro shots where the background could be soft and out of focus, and then when we look into the distance, it brings back infinite focus. All of that happens inside of this post-production volume. Now, one other thing that I've shown you, version 5.53, I think, has the new feature. They haven't really shown it off much, but the clouds, right, of the volumetric clouds. And if we click that and go up to the details, you'll recall that it has a M, that means material, underscore simple volumetric cloud, right? And I like to find that in the content browser and go and look for it. it is a material, and I can create a material instance. I'm going to erase these two because I just did those, you know, earlier for myself. So you can see this is what you would see. You click on that and it will bring you to this material. But that is the master material with all of its functionality. You don't want to go changing that just yet. And if you do, you want to make a duplicate of it and call it my simple master material. But I'm just going to go here, click material instance, and say it's my material instance, right? And then I'm going to move that into the material. So now it's mine. And I can double click that, open it so you can see it in the scene. And now, instead of having to deal with the entire master material and all of its interconnected nodes, we have it all laid out here. In the case of the clouds, layout underscore cloud type is a new powerful function, as is cloud shape, storm, clouds, and multiscatter. For example, I'm just going to turn on, just to show you what happens, turn on the storm clouds. And so now when I increase this, keep your eye on the view screen back there, it increases the amount of the density of those cumulonimbus clouds to give them more definition, like they've got heavy water vapor. And that does make them look a little bit more ominous, but it also shows off the new higher quality volumetric cloud shading that we've got. Right now, the shadow casting is not working correctly, and clouds cast shadows on the ground, on the earth, and that adds a lot of realism. I'll be showing that and fixing that so I can show you how that works later. It's an easy thing, and it adds a lot to your scene because these clouds are animated and moving, and as the day goes on, you know, and plus you could go in here like this, go up to this stratocumulus type, and use this or the nimbostratus like to create a much rainier scene. So when a certain thing happens and you want to look like, uh-oh, it's going to rain, you can have increase this so that it becomes much more overcast. Or you can reduce it and increase the altostratus, which is the high scale of the volume of the cloud, and any combination. If you increase the nimbostratus storm clouds, it also can activate lightning controls down in here. Lightning flashes, lightning strikes, all that sort of thing. And you can start adding that. So realism is there waiting for you if you can start looking at all these variables and testing them. But be careful, like I always said, make sure you're adjusting it and not screwing up your old projects that you've did, so you've got, you know, your material modified specifically for this one. But we have a much more realistic looking scene right now. And you can see if I were to go to the I weren't pulling that off. If I were to go to the directional light and make the sunset, you know, I don't have the night feature turned on right now, but as you can see, it's the environmental fog is hiding that the sun's position as it gets further down the horizon. You can see what sunset would look like. Or if I bring it all the way back, there's the sunrise happening over here, depending on what kind of the scene we want to show, right? And then like noonday, you know, would be whatever position we choose. So all of this is under your control, and you can see how they're working. So like I said, we want to adjust this landscape material. We're not going to alter it or spend too much time on this because every landscape material is different. You can make your own. A lot of different landscape materials are available. but they do have some features in this one that are similar in a lot of the ones you'll use. And so I wanted to demonstrate how you alter your landscape material. It has this My Landscape Material instance, opens it up, so I'm not altering the original master. And it shows snow is currently turned off. When we first came in, I mean, it has to, you make these changes, it has to go in and adjust the shader, right? It looked like this until we turned that off. So now we're not using snow because I said false to use snow. Water could be used, but as I mentioned, right now there's no flat spot in my terrain, so I can select the landscape, go over here to landscape, sculpting, flatten, and the center of the circle will become the flat spot, and I can make it, as big as we want. And so now the water material gets applied exactly where the flat spot is, and that's how this particular auto material works. If we wanted to, we can go in there and soften it, which creates a little more slope, and so it didn't drop off quite so quickly. So it's this like little pond down here if you wanted to see what water looks like. And then one of the things is very powerful to use in this particular one: dirt, grass, stones, and rock. I turn on these features: rock advanced, advanced UVs, procedurals, and this rock color correction. Same here, all 4 of those with the color correction, and for the grass, and for the dirt. And the reason I do that is there are debug functions, and most people do that. They build in debugging functions to make it easier for you to adjust this, but this is a common thing you'll use anyway. But let's go into the grass feature. It's kind of easy to see where the grass is, right? Because it's green. But what if we make it more obvious for now, and we just go in there and make it very green and say save. So now it's much more obvious, even from a distance, exactly where. Oh, let me close the landscape material there, or landscape editing. Now it's easy to see what that green is doing. So what are these areas that aren't green? What's the deal with that? Let me go up to dirt. I'm going to make dirt the opposite. It's going to be red, right? And so now I've changed the dirt areas to red, but as you look around, you'll see, oh, there actually isn't very much dirt. There are dirt areas here immediately around the water because they're really close to flat. So it must only apply that if it's very, very flat, but not very sloped. And so that's useful if you want to have like beach sand around water. That sort of thing might be exactly what you want that dirt for. If you want to make it a little bit more complex, any areas in here that interact with the grass, you can see some of that. But we may want to have it so that we increase a little bit more of that dirt. Now, what about stones and rock? Okay. Stones down here. What's the story with stones? I'm going to make it purple. And you see it already. Wow. Okay. So we have red here. Let me roll back on my mouse wheel so I can slow down the zoom. Right next to the water, between the grass, but then when the slope starts increasing, when the hill gets a little steeper, and then when it gets flat again, it turns to grass. But the the purple region tells us, right, that is stones. So this stones area here, the purple, is a certain texture that's applied right here, but it also creates the procedural stones on the ground. See that? So just like the grass, where it grows this green grass wherever we paint grass, it has stones pop up in areas that have the purple stones. I'm not coloring the stones themselves purple. I'm just color correcting the textures to make it easier to see what's going on. And so I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. It's climbing up the mountain. So now all this on the mountain here must be rock. And what I noticed right away is this is kind of backwards from how 90% of landscape materials are made. What they usually say is these areas at the foothills of mountains are rock, and they have rocks all around them. But if you go up here, it's called stone, and it's larger, and there's larger cliff-like stones and things that are up on the sides of the mountain and like cliffs. And so normally these are reversed in what they're called. But let's make this one blue, right? Just so you can see that that is indeed what's happening, right? So water, dirt, grass, what they call stone, and then anywhere, and that's based on the slope, the intensity of the slope, how steep something is. Now let me go, just for now, I'm going to go back to the existential height fog, and let's just make it real easy and just turn it off. Okay, so now we can see fog is gone, and we can see how all that is working. Now one of the things I didn't like, for example, in my case, right here, this stone area, or what they call the rock area, right? And so I can go down here, make sure it makes it, you can, by setting these colors, you can see which one it is you're going to alter and make sure you don't alter the wrong thing. I'm going to go back here and make this white again. And I think that these stones are a little too wet, shiny looking. The specular quality is a little too high. So I want to increase the roughness of that. I notice that if I go like this and if I'm increasing this value next to MW_rock roughness, it actually gets more smooth. And that's because they have it inverted. There's a feature down here that's MW's inverted rock roughness, like that. But so you'll want to bring it down to that value, not below 0. But in order to make it as rough as possible, it would be really low, like 0.2 or something like that. And so that starts to make it a little less. It still has some shininess, but not as much. And you can go down in here and say rock specular and do the same thing. And you can increase it or decrease it. And so I'm going to make that all the way down to 0.1, so that it is, the rocks are not quite as shiny as they were looking before. Then I might also want to increase the normal intensity of the rock, the bump value that comes from your normal map applied to these mountains. And so I may want to bring it up to 1 from 0.5, and you can see it intensifies the roughness. And with mountains and things like that, you don't spend a lot of time climbing the mountain, but from a distance it starts to change a lot about what makes that mountain look realistic from here, all the details you've built into it. And so a couple little changes I've made. Now one of the things I'm thinking is I want this area, I think, to be like more tropical. Right now it's looking very dry. So if I open this up again, I'm going to go to my grass material, right here, and I'm going to see how the slope power is affecting it. It has a couple of variables here. One, grass max world position, and that is how high the grass can actually go. You know, and right now they have it set to 100,000, so or a million. It's like really high. But we can't tell because the grass only goes to up here, and up the slopes it just stops. It won't go that high up the slope. But if you're in some place like Hawaii or a tropical island, the greenery and the grass goes right up the slope of the mountain. And so I'm going to take this slope power, grass slope power, and I think it may be inverted. Let's see what happens if I bring it down. 4, 3, yep. So I'm bringing it down. Now it's at 1, and you can see that the grass is going all the way to the tip of the mountain. Let me bring that down to like 0.1, and you can see the grass grows all the way to the top of the mountain. Right? Now, just to illustrate how this grass max position works, if we start bringing that value down, it's bringing the altitude down. And once it gets to where the altitude of the mountain is, you can see the grass stops. So now we know that spot right there, that green spot, that is roughly 11,000. So that is the vertical Z value of that position. Now we can find out, you know, go to what would probably be one of the peaks areas and say, let's increase that until it covers all the pink. Right? So looks like this is like the highest point of my terrain right here. And so we bring it up, you know, like that, until it looks like my my mountains are approximately 26,000 feet, or whatever the units are, right? But now that I know that the grass can go all the way to the top, I can go back to that variable again, grass variable, right here, and change that slope power so that it can't grow at every angle. It can't go completely to 90 degrees. It has to be a little flat, but it does go up the mountain, right? Kind of like that. And what other features? Remember, they're affecting each other. And so I have to decide how I want it to be affected. And so slope power, grass specular, grass world position, all of these things affect one another. Grass max world position power, right? And it's super low number. It's 0.0001. What happens if I increase that? Wow, the minute it goes negative, it's gone. And the stones take over. So you have to play with these variables to see how they're affecting the scene. But as I increase that, it is interplaying with the other layers. And so you kind of have to get a feel for how to use that, you know, how to use these features. But, you know, I think I'm gonna have it so that the grass is going up these slopes more than it was, but not completely overtaking the pink, the, you know, this the stones layer here. And let's see, I'm going to change that from pink to kind of a coral color because we're from St. George and I'm used to seeing coral colors, you know. And so the rocks, maybe they have a little coral color that they add to the texture at the base of the mountain. Maybe that is a little too much saturation. Maybe I want it a little darker, you know, like we have it around here. And so, you know, I'm just playing with it a little bit. Now let's change the grass. I kind of like how the grass is behaving for the moment, so I'm just going to bring that down. Although, what if we make it a little darker green? Right? I can add a little saturation maybe, but I'm going to make it a darker green, like you might see foliage in the tropics, or, you know, somewhere near the equator. And so it is not going to change the color of the grass here, but it is having an effect. Now the dirt, you remember, was the red. And this is all artistic choice. You don't have to do it this way. You know, it's just I'm showing you how I'm doing it. Let's see what we can do to change the amount of red throughout the green. I suspect slope power has something to do with it. So let's go here and see. Yeah, if I reduce that from its 120 value, it starts creeping in higher intensity at greater slopes. And so down around here in the low altitudes, and the more flat it is, there's more dirt, which can be sand color if we want, right? We can pull it all the way down so that it's kind of like sand on the beach, right? And we can use the slope power, increasing it, which is affected strictly by, you know, how steep the slope is. But that's kind of starting to be interesting. Maybe it's bleeding a little bit too much away from where the water is currently. Now, one thing I'm not going to do is we can just create a layer and go in there and grab a brush and paint, and there will be rocks and stone and dirt, you know, anywhere we paint. But right now, I kind of like the way that's lying out, the variation in colors here. Now, up in the mountains, let's see. That's the rock, right? Yeah, the rock. I'm going to make it a little darker. Give it some basalt quality like you would see in Hawaii or around here, you know, all the volcanoes that are around here. You can see that's excessive, right? But I'm going to bring in a little green. So maybe there's some copper in addition to the basalt. And I like that because greenish and the coral color are playing off each other, right? And we haven't really done anything crazy. We haven't gone in and modified this at a deep value, but you can. You know, we can go into the landscape variation here, you know, and turn this stuff on and start altering the variation of the terrain based on the UV size and things like that. But here we have, you know, our modified terrain, and we can adjust it like we want. But that's going to be all for today. And next we will go on to, in the next tutorial, we're going to go on to foliage, and then making it into a more complete scene. But we'll start with procedural foliage and apply, and we'll grow trees and things all over this entire terrain automatically, and show you how powerful this is. But this is exactly how you would create a super real looking environment. You can just use these tools to set up your scene. This has taken us a little while because I'm doing it very slowly for the purposes of a tutorial, but this would be very easy to do automatically, the entire thing we've done so far, in about an hour. And that includes the menu, the setup of the game modes, the terrain, and everything. You get in there and you're going to get the hang of this very quickly and have this power of creating amazing looking things very quickly, as if you were just painting it with a brush. So there we go.